Our session today is film festivals and markets, building audiences and business opportunities. We're trying our very best to make this journey of going to film festivals and navigating markets seem as simple as possible to many of you who are debut filmmakers. And we have a very eminent panel and guests here who are willing to share their knowledge with us. So we have with us DaCunha. DaCunha is, I think, a pioneer in, bringing Indian films to international film festivals. She has been doing this for many decades, and she's almost like a bridge between India and the rest of the world when it comes to taking films. She's also been in casting for films. And we have Chris Paton, who has been a marketing consultant of films, and he was also the head of acquisition for Fortismo Films. He has great experience with film markets and also knows the whole scene of the world sales agents, which confuse so many of us. And we have with us Paolo Bertolin, who is currently the programmer for South Asia for Venice International Film Festival. And also he programs and curates and consults for over 10 more festivals, many of them in Europe and Asia. And we have two young filmmakers who have experienced the Film Bazaar with their projects, and that's Kanu Behl, who has had his film Titli in the co-production market and also in the work-in-progress lab, after which it had its world premiere in Cannes in 2014. And Reddy, the director of Titli, which was in the work-in-progress lab and had its world premiere in Locarno in 2015. So the idea is to just share our experiences and then open the session to questions by the audiences. So please feel free to ask us any of the doubts that you have in mind so that we could help clarify if possible. So I would like to begin with you because you have been doing this much longer than any of us here. So you started in the 1970s taking Indian films to international film festivals, mostly European festivals, and you have also attended, over the decades, you have attended almost all what we call the A-list festivals, that is the festivals for the cinephiles, the festivals which provide opportunities for great press, audiences, and also, helps making a possibly unknown filmmaker into an author. So I would like to ask you if you could let us know or reflect on how is it that you decided to do this? What was the need of the hour then? And if it is still relevant now, how do you see that international film festivals help Indian films?
Well, I think I was very fortunate because there's a hum in this, yeah. You should make it softer, please. Yeah. It was the most fortunate time. This was when Satyajit Ray's enormous shadow was over our cinema. It was very easy to access film festivals. I started by starting film societies in Bombay. There was Anandam, which we started in the late 60s, and it really took the place by storm. When that ended, I started in another film called Drishti, and Drishti was to only promote Indian cinema. Drishti was what really prompted me to go into the film festival scene. Then I joined the Directorate of Film Festivals. That was in the early 70s, and the directorate was my training ground. It was really wonderful to work and learn from the experience that I had with the Directorate of Film Festivals. The 70s was the golden period of our cinema. That's the time when Mrinal Sen had just made Bhuvan Shom, Ray was at his peak, and every first film made by about 30 filmmakers at that time went to festivals. It was a time when festivals pleaded for Indian films. It was glorious. Every festival had a film in competition. In other sections, there was one year, 1977, when Khan had an Indian film in every section. So when I look back and think of the reason, it could be because there was a resurgence of great creativity. These filmmakers, Ghatashraddha, Samskara, Girish Karnad made Kadu, Shyam Benegal's 2 films went to Cannes, Berlin and Cannes. There was such a resurgence of creative talent, and at that time, looking at films was very focused. There was a mutual divide between Bollywood and our kind of indie cinema. So Bollywood did not feature in our programming till about the middle 80s or late 80s. So we were very focused. We were able to take the kind of films we wanted. And it was a much simpler world. There was enormous government finance. The Film Finance Corporation and then NFDC gave the money for these films. They were made on a low budget and they earned it back. So there were many fortuitous reasons for our films to do well. Then after the 80s, going to the 90s, and especially the turn of the century, it all changed. And now it is not just taking your film to a festival and winning an award. We need places like Film Bazaar to deal with the market, to take your films there, to know what to do with your film. A filmmaker is no longer just required to make his film. He has to be marketing savvy, he has to be erudite and articulate. I mean, like look at the pitch this morning. Previously, directors didn't have to do this. And it's hard on a director because a director is not used to these other avenues. So there's a lot we have to learn that we now ask the people around us to tell us about how they function in today's world.
Thank you, Uma. Well, Paolo, I would like to ask you the next question. In the recent years, you've taken the Indian film court, and then after that, you've chosen Visarane. And both of these films have done extremely well in India when they released, or at least in audience awareness, because they had been to Venice Film Festival. However, when these films come to Venice, what is the advice you would like to give a filmmaker? Are they ready to make the most of a platform like a Venice Film Festival?
Okay, this is much more specific. The obvious piece of advice that I can give to people who get selected, and it's not going to be that many, besides Court and Visaranai, in the last 2 years, our sidebar Venice Days also selected The Labor of Love and Island City. So the past 2 years there were 2 Indian films each. So it's difficult. I mean, it's difficult to get selected. And yeah, you're right. Whenever this very rare opportunity comes, you have to grab it and not to waste this chance. The obvious advice, although it's becoming more and more controversial, is you should get a sales agent. You should get a sales agent because they are the ones who know how to maximize your positioning within a festival like Venice, and who already know how to work with Venice and within Venice. Because Venice is going to ask you things. People in Venice during the festival will ask you things. And sometimes, as a newcomer, in terms of being a producer and a filmmaker, you're faced with so many challenges that you cannot face them all by yourself. Okay, if you don't manage to get a sales agent, at least the very basic thing is that you need to get a good press agent. In order for the film to get the widest exposure, or at least to target the kind of press, the critics who could like the film. Maybe the film will be picked up after Venice, because it happens. It happens that a film comes to the festival, at first it doesn't find a sales agent. It's not the ideal situation. But maybe if it gets a reception that is good enough to create some buzz, then maybe someone will pick it up. And that can be created thanks to a good critical and press reception. So these are, I guess, the two main things that I could suggest to someone. But if you get selected to Venice, most of the times, either you already have a sales agent who might have been in touch with you starting from your presentation here at the co-production market or at the work in progress lab, or if you don't have it at the moment of selection, whenever the announcement of the selection is made, expect sales agents to jump at you like grasshoppers. I mean, they will come all to you and yeah, they will ask you to see the film. Then you need to select which ones looks better to work with. Maybe eventually no one of them will pick the film, and it will happen after Venice. I mean, even this year, during Venice, I'm thinking of a film that I especially like that came to Venice without a sales agent and only announced being picked up during the festival. So yeah, that's pretty much what I can suggest. I don't know if you had anything else in mind that's specific.
No, I think that's very helpful advice, because from my experience, a lot of filmmakers are just happy to be at a festival, and they get selected and they think it's done, you know,
No,
and everything will happen automatically
there is a lot of work
later.
to start. Actually, I was thinking, I mean, just to mention another interesting detail, whenever Visaranai was selected, I suggested Vetri to re-edit the subtitles. I mean, actually, I went through them with him, because the subtitles of interrogation were originally intended for the local market, meaning that there were so many words of address from Tamil, even in the subtitle, like amma and this kind of stuff, that we in Europe, we don't have any idea what it is. So the English subtitles have been redone, trying to making things more clearly, also because the plot is complicated, and there were several points where even the committee, when they had actually seen the film, they had actually didn't get it. So yes, a film can be selected, but then you can still work on the film. Sometimes if you submitted a work in progress, yeah, you shouldn't think the film is completed. Like, you know, if you exactly submitted a rough cut or a work in progress, go till the very last minute of it and work to make it, yeah, I guess Raam has something to say about this.
I just wanted to say that Deepti premiered in Locarno. It wasn't complete. It had an Asian premiere at Mami. It wasn't complete. I completed it. I premiered it in August. I completed it in December, January. We won Locarno and parts of Mami, but we still pushed because I wasn't done with my process, and my entire team thought we could better it. So we just went as far as our process needed to go, and we used the festivals as launching boards.
Thanks so much, Ram, and very useful advice. And Chris, so world sales agents, this is a term that many Indian filmmakers hear for the first time, perhaps at Film Bazaar. You know, the idea that as a film programmer, I've seen that most of Indian entries, you know, even when I was working for Venice or when I'm programming for other international film festivals, they come directly from from the director, and that's the spirit of independent cinema in India, because the director is the producer, is the editor, is everything, and trying to push their film. Chris, there are two questions. One is, when a director is applying to several festivals at a time, and waiting to hear back, can you give some tips on, what should they do when they hear from two festivals which are very close to each other and both are asking for a premiere? And second is that, how do you go about getting yourself a world sales agent?
Well, I think it's interesting you say that, because my background initially was as a press agent for most of the period until I joined one of my clients who I'd worked with a long, long time, which was Fortissimo. Started doing acquisitions with them. So following up on what Paolo was saying, I would say the press agent is probably more important than the sales agent, because it is still especially difficult in the current period to find a sales agent, and in this very competitive market, it's likely that you will be approached by sales agents on acceptance of a festival. But of course, before that, you're working without one. So coming back to your query about having those options, I think you would turn to probably the NFDC or other people like Una or someone to get advice about that festival option or the festival route to go with, because of course, if you opt for one festival over another, you can also exclude potential for the film later on, because all festivals are of course competitive with each other, and some are insistent on world premieres, others on regional premieres or international premieres. So they all have their own set of finite rules, and you need someone to guide you, because you could quickly choose to, say, go with an offer that's made here because someone's seen your film in the library, and suddenly you've committed yourself to a very small festival in Poland, but by doing so you've just quickly eliminated a whole other round of options. So before accepting anything or applying for anywhere, it's probably good to get some advice as to where to go.
But do you think it's important, like Paolo did say that it is important in a way to have a sales agent, because festivals do have deliverables and deadlines, and also these difficult decisions on which festival to go to, because ultimately you want to build your audiences. You want
I think that's the ideal circumstance, but what I was trying to stress is it is very difficult to get a sales agent. As I was explaining in a panel I was doing earlier today, a small sales company, which is the type of company that would likely pick up an independent Indian film, has a slate of maybe 15 movies a year, 15 to 20 films. They're not going to take 15 Indian films. They're probably going to take one. That's what we would do, 2, 3, maybe, depending on the strength of the movie. So it is quite difficult to lobby or approach those sales companies unless you also have the package of like, oh, I've been accepted into Synergies in Cannes, and of course then, as Paolo said, it's the other way around. The sales agents are chasing you. So I'd have to say that that's ideal with the sales agent, but not really open to everyone, especially until they have the birth of a festival in which to anchor the picture,
Okay.
In my experience, I found that sales agents do not really go for Indian films that easily.
Yes.
It's very hard to get in. So how does the filmmaker reach out to a sales agent at a festival? Should they do their homework earlier? Is there some way?
Well, exactly what I was saying about, to a lot of filmmakers I've met here, it's probably better to utilize, I think this is a fantastic opportunity to meet critics, festival programmers, sales agents. You're also able to approach people that in different circumstances, like in Cannes, would never have time to talk to you. So at these wonderful cocktail parties, it's a really good opportunity to circulate. However, an evening cocktail party is not a place to give the whole pitch and sales pitch to that sales agent. I think it's better to just introduce yourself to someone like me if I was doing acquisitions, express who you are, what you're doing, ask what I'm doing, and then, you know, build on the relationship from there and then further down the road. But I find a lot of people confront me with their whole 10-minute sales pitch, and I'm already on my third glass of wine, so I'm not really that attentive, you know?
Or are handing you the DVDs, or, you know, that.
So,
Yeah.
so Kanu, well, then it comes to you. You were in the co-production market, then you were in the work-in-progress lab. The year that you were in the work-in-progress lab, there was already a great buzz at the Film Bazaar. Everyone was looking at your film to be selected to Cannes, and it did. It was in a certain regard. Now, how did you go about getting a sales agent? Did a sales agent approach you? And how did that help you, especially considering that your Indian release, unfortunately, you know, was not a very successful theatrical release, despite it being a critically acclaimed film. But you have had releases in France and other countries. So if you could give us this perspective on, you know, the approach and whether this is something you will follow for your next film as well.
Yeah, well, first, to just add to what Chris was saying, I think it's really important that when you're, as a filmmaker or as anyone who's attached as the crew to a film, whether you're a producer or a director, when you're going and meeting someone in the evening, it's not really about the pitch. I think it's about, they're looking to meet you and not your project. So I think it's really important that you go and leave an impression of who you are and what you're made of. And that in itself will end up going a long way in speaking about your project if and when they get to it later on. So I think that really is the key when you're meeting people. As far as Titli goes, yeah, so for me, it was a really bizarre journey because up until then, I had been just really busy making this film, and I had not, to be honest, I had not thought of a festival at all. It was an Indian story. It was a story for an Indian audience, and I had never aimed it at a festival or anything. It's just that it went to the Screenwriters Lab, which was the first step for me. My interest in coming to Film Bazaar was that I wanted to improve the script, work with mentors, people who would tell me what was missing. And from there, it went in the co-production market. But fortunately, I got funded completely out of India, from where it went to the work-in-progress lab. So here I was using the work-in-progress as another tool to do the same thing with the edit that I did with the script. And fortunately, it got really great buzz, which was a surprise for the whole team. And we were, yeah, it was in the viewing room where it got seen first by Directors Fortnight, and then eventually it ended up at a certain regard. I think, so coming at it, we had, and we were not acquainted to the world of sales agents and press and PR at all, but I think we reached out to Guneet, who had, so I think a good way to do it is to reach out to people who've done it before, and they act as a knowledge base, and they will fill stuff in. So we reached out to Guneet, and she sort of came in and helped us with international sales, and that's how we eventually got West End onto the project. And yes, we had a press, a publicist also going in, and as much as I had no idea what difference that will make, I end up realizing now that it was massive, that we had that team in place even before we were at Cannes, even before we reached there. And I completely agree with Chris that the PR is really, because one is the exercise of getting into a festival, but once you're there, there are so many good films from so many good countries, from so many countries the world over, that you have to get heard and seen. So I think that made a huge difference. The fact that we had focused press and we were getting talked about, and it was getting handled in a certain way. It eventually ended up releasing in France. It got great press in France. It ran for about 9 weeks, did 60,000 admissions, got sold in Germany, Israel, Middle East, several other territories. So I think the key to the film doing its complete festival circuit, which was about 30 festivals, and doing sales across 7 or 8 countries, in spite of it being a tough film, was because West End knew what they were doing, and because of a lot of the PR and press beginning that we made at Cannes, where also it was coming after Lunchbox. It was the year after Lunchbox. So yeah.
And,
Can I just add a footnote, because maybe we took for granted something earlier. Maybe I took something for granted earlier. You know, when you have a sales agent, the sales agent will hire the press agent. So, I mean, it's taken for granted that if you get a sales agent, they will take care of that. But if you don't have it, at least get that, because it's what is key.
yeah. So I want to understand, so all these territories that were sold and all these festivals that it went to, how much of it was your decision and how much was West End's? I mean, do you just give your film to a sales agent and they handle the entire strategy? Or?
Can I say, you found the sales agent through Guneet before Cannes. So that's something, you know, because usually you find a sales agent at the festival or post. Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's possibly the worst case scenario, right? In an ideal case scenario, once you do know that you're at a festival, and this is a question to both of you, I think possibly the best case scenario is to have someone at least a month before you go there, so that...
Sometimes bigger sales agents wouldn't touch a film after it already premieres, even if it's a big festival. I mean, because they want to be there and strategize from the very beginning. They want to be the ones to control and decide where the film is premiering, whether they should negotiate for a slot, because this is another important detail. Sometimes your film gets selected in Cannes or gets selected in Venice. In Venice, it's crucial whether you get a slot in the first weekend or in the second half of the festival. If you have an important sales agent behind you, the sales agent will also negotiate for the slot. Usually, if you don't have a strong sales agent, or, I mean, there can be various strategical tricks that you can use to get a good slot, but unfortunately, most of the times the films that don't come with a sales agent are the ones that end up towards the end of the festival, where, I mean, both in Cannes and Venice, I mean, in Venice, more patent, more obvious. There are less people, there's less press covering the festival, so even being in Cannes and Venice, but being on the last Friday, may be not as good as being on the first weekend, and that's where having a sales agent can count.
Or for that matter, even in terms of sections, you know, how certain regard can be, if you have director's fortnight or critics week, then...
Well, that's really a draw of the luck, because, you know, sometimes your film, I was in a session earlier today when I was saying, you know, sometimes it's a blessing if your film is not in Cannes, because I'm really thinking of the case, let's say Court, or let's take Corn Island, the Georgian film that a couple of years ago was rejected by both Cannes and Venice, but it ended up in Carlo Vivari. It won in Carlo Vivari, and it did splendidly. It sold to many territories. It's one of the short-listed titles for the Academy Awards. Now, I mean, it's a title that really built up the career of the filmmaker. Court. If Court had ended up at the Critics' Week in Cannes, would it have had the same kind of reaction that it had in Venice? I'm wondering. I'm wondering if maybe it would have been overshadowed by another film. What happens if you are in the Critics' Week and there is this American film that everybody loves and you're the second best? You're not going to get the same. I mean, even being in Cannes.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember that the year that I screened at Cannes, the same time as my first screening was the Ryan Gosling film, the one that he directed. So all the girls were heading to that screening.
Well, thank you so much, Kanu. And we'll come to Raam.
I just wanted to add something tiny to that same point. which is when you're picking a festival, one of the things you can look at is how the festival is sort of treating your film. There's a possibility, if the festival is extremely warm to your film, that's a good sign. That means the festival itself will program you on the first weekend in a prime show, which is what happened to us. And there are many other factors that could come into the decision of a festival. One of the reasons we decided to go to Locarno is we hadn't had a film there, an Indian film there for 8 years. So we were ending a dry spell. They were ready for something new. So all this comes into it. So it's not an exact science. There are a lot of factors that are involved.
Well, Raam,
Were you advised by, your people from abroad how you should tackle your film?
Yes, we were advised. I mean, a lot of advice came from relationships at Film Bazaar, because that's where I created my network. And we had experienced producers who gave us feedback, who've done this before.
So, Raam, since you've given us hints, can you tell us about your journey? Because Tithi was a great success at Locarno. It's gone to several festivals. It also had pretty successful release in Karnataka, and it was noticed a lot in Bombay and Delhi and urban centers because it got the support. After winning in Mami, it got the support of Amir Khan, and your film has been spoken about. But you have chosen to go with a co-producer and not a sales agent. So if you could tell us something about that.
Yeah, so as you could see, I was eager to jump in on several points because I just gone through this. But to start, Film Bazaar completely changed my life. I was absolutely nobody. I didn't know anything about the business, absolutely nothing. And I came in the work in progress lab. So at rough cut stage, knowing Zilch, and was very lucky to have this platform and the support system that built, just by going up to friendly people and having a chat. Everyone's so wonderfully friendly. So I owe my entire career to Film Bazaar. I just wanted to say that. There's a so dreams can be built here, they can. The second thing that changed my life was Locarno and the way it was received there. But a film festival and a premiere is just the start of a film's journey. Whether it goes well or not, the film has a major journey after that. So you can't just be like, I've arrived, And I actually felt a little bit like that when I got there. I was like, oh my God, this is so great. But there is a massive amount of work to do after that in terms of everything. Now, film festivals are, of course, prestigious as a premiere space, but they ideally are to lead to something else, whether it's international distribution, critical acclaim, which is positioning you as an international director, or being able to create buzz without a big P&A budget back in India, which is something that Court did and we were able to do. All this kind of comes slowly and can build organically. We were one of the films that built organically. One of the greatest partnerships that I was able to get at Film Bazaar, which was at a rough cut stage, was a co-producer from the US who is extremely experienced and has done this with many films before, and has been experienced in positioning the films she's produced and been part of. So that was, within our team, there was a wealth of experience already. So we were able to, whenever we went to a festival, we usually went with an agenda. After Locarno, as I said, I continued to work on my film, which was a decision that was important to me as an artist and can be questioned perhaps, but after winning, we had about 50 invitations immediately, and we rejected all of them to finish the film the way I wanted to finish it. But having said that, I did finish the film I wanted to finish. I want to make one very important comment about Indian films and sales agents and this whole system. Our films, one of the reasons maybe we don't get sales agents so easily is because we're very long. And this is an issue that a lot of us have dealt with. It's unfortunate, but it's better that you accept it early on, that a 90-minute film is far more friendly to world distribution than a 95-minute film. I wouldn't even say a 2-hour film. I mean, that's a bit of a joke, but it's really sensitive. So the elasticity of length like an economic concept, it's highly elastic. And so if you're a little bit too long, there's another film from a neighboring country that's a little shorter that'll be more easily programmed. So I was at 2 hours, 40 minutes when I got here, and I got like a slap on every cheek, head, everywhere, from the work in progress lab saying, okay, you have a film in there, that's good, but some people said cut 40 minutes, somebody said cut an hour, and I was like, what do you mean cut an hour? I mean, what do you mean cut an hour? I was like, I'll try, because I had a lot of respect for the advice, but I was like, what do you mean? But I went back and I took 6 months to cut 40 minutes, and I think it's helped even in the local release. So we're so married to our work, but you know, bringing it down to its bare essentials, especially for your debut, is extremely important.
Can I interrupt here? Would you advise 2 versions of a film, in the sense that for an Indian audience, we are used to a certain pacing? Would you have an international or an Indian, or do you want one version?
This is very interesting, because I went through that same philosophical dilemma, but I definitely think there should be one version of a film. Look, unless you know, you've spent a lot of money and your whole life depends on this, you've sold your land and you're going to go bankrupt and you have to make that money back, fair enough, okay, then do what you got to do, it's fine, there's no judgment. But if you're looking at cinema as an art, it's very important, get all this advice, right? You get advice from international people, you get advice from Indians, you know, it's very important to make the best film you think you can make and then position it. That's something we were talking about earlier. First make the film that you really want to make so you can sleep well at night, you know, and then decide which is your best premiere. It need not be Cannes. It could. It could be any festival. A festival where the market is useful, but also a festival without a market that's very critically respected is great. You can premiere in one of those and then go to a market. You can skip all festivals and just release in your hometown and do great and then go to festivals later. There are a million ways to do this. So treat your films specifically, try and find other films that have followed similar journeys. So as soon as my film was being positioned, I was lucky to meet Chaitanya Tamhane, who actually told me about Film Bazaar and was a little bit of a guide to me saying, okay, this is what we did. So we won the same awards in Venice and Locarno, the same thing. So we had very similar journeys. So I had him telling me, so I looked at Court as a template, and I thought, okay, we could sort of follow this. We didn't follow it to the T because of slightly different content, but that was a great template. I learned from the template. I held my film for a long time after the first premiere before we released. We created a lot of buzz. We got organic P&A happening. My P&A budget was extremely small, but we were still able to get a lot of press, a lot of curiosity back home. But then we had to deal with the exhibition system, which is another panel altogether. You know, so it's a long journey, but treat your film as your child. It's unique, and it needs what its skills support.
Has your film been released abroad?
So that's, we've done a lot of things strategically with this film that I completely stand by. So we're still working, we're still doing that, and we're kind of holding it again for a reason, the way we held our release. But there are things in the pipeline that I'm excited about. So, so we've been able to tick off the festival box, the critical acclaim, then we did a local release, we did single screens, we did a national release, and international strategy is still growing, is somewhat being linked to my next project. You don't have to treat a film as one film, you can treat a career if you have the luxury to do that, position it based on what you want your next film to be like. So just be sensible about it, and it's more of an art than a science.
Wow. So Raam, I remember you coming in completely clueless to the Film Bazaar.
So I often say Deepti is my professional mother.
I also remember the first night we met when you told me, oh, it's 2 hours 40, and I asked you, is the final length? And you said, yeah, pretty much. I really remember that, and
These
I was
are
like,
secrets. These are secrets.
I really remember that.
No, I didn't
You were
say
so
that.
convinced.
No, he's a liar. Don't listen to Paolo.
So convinced. You were so convinced.
I mean, that was the 2 hour 40 minute was way better than the way it is now. You know, no one knows what they're talking about, and I'm the smartest person.
Yeah. So, well, I think we've given our bit right now, and if there's anyone who wants to, you know, ask a question and get some clarifications.
What was the P&A that you had, and then how did it change as you went out wanting to distribute the film?
That's a tough question, actually. I'm sorry, I passed it on.
So, my film was produced by Yashraj and Dibakar Banerjee. And yeah, well, we were supposed to have a marketing. Well, usually, I don't know whether I can say we were supposed to have that budget, but usually for a film like Titli, you would have as much for marketing as you spent on making it, which would be about four, 3.5, 4. For a big studio like Yashraj, who are independently owned and are backing the film because they like it. Eventually, it was closer to 50 lakhs, which is pretty much like a non-existent marketing budget for a Hindi film, even if it's a platform release. And the reason the budget changed, the P&A budget changed, there were several reasons. So Dibakar was co-producing on my film, and my film was ready in May of 2014, and it was supposed to come out before Bomkesh, which was the other film that Dibakar was directing and producing with the same studio. For multiple reasons, my film got delayed, and Bomkesh ended up releasing first, which was, I think, third quarter of 2015. And then Titli was or I think it was March of 2015, I don't remember. And then Titli came out in October of 2015, post what Bomkesh had done at the box office. So that was a major factor, and I'm sure there was several other factors connected with that.
So Titi's destiny was written day by day, and we didn't have a template in place, so we didn't have a plan or much, or just figure it out. We tried to spend as little as we could on P&A because the P&A is what kills indie numbers. It's not the budget, it's the P&A budget, which is not economically, it doesn't fit the original budget because P&A costs are standardized in some way. It's like musical rights don't really work for indie films. You just can't pay for them because musical rights are pegged at commercial values. So we spent about 20 lakhs on our P&A for our local release. And we did, our P&A for our national release was Amir Khan tweeting. That's about it. So that's a little bit of a joke, but yes, the national release was almost a zero budget P&A because the numbers for a national release of a regional film, however well it did, I mean, we got a second week, for example, which is great for an indie Kannada film that it's probably never happened for a film like mine. P&A budgets have to be very, very carefully positioned for indie films. And that's where festivals come in and play a big role. So a festival journey replaces your P&A for free in some ways. So you have to use that as much as you can, squeeze as much as you can from festivals.
Good evening, all. My question to you is that you said that there are millions of ways releasing film in film festivals and hometown. But if like a film like Titi had a great in film festivals, but what if I like release in my hometown? So if it's creating the buzz in film festival, then it will be among the people. But if the persons have no knowledge of what's happening in film festival, then how will he connect to that? That this film is going great in this area.
That's a great question, and I think what you do is you have to enthuse your local press in saying something. You've done something notable on the world stage, which the bigger publications will start to take interest in. So. It starts from there, and then it trickles down. So it's like you're going top down, closer to the grassroots. So eventually you start to enthuse the press, then you try and start to enthuse, say, the bigger exhibitors. That's what happened for us. It may be totally different for others. And then slowly that trickles down. Our single screen run happened 2-3 weeks, to whatever degree we were able to do it, happened after our multiplex run. So it actually starts at festivals and slowly finds its way But you know, this is something that I'd like to say, is that a film, whether it premieres, wherever it premieres, gets the biggest award, wins the Oscar for Best Picture or Best Foreign Film, it's the same film before and after all those awards. You know, it's like you've won 20 awards or you've won nothing. The film is exactly the same, right? So if people like your film, they like your film. If they're sitting in a theater and they come out and they tell their friend, eventually for indie films, it's word of mouth, you know. P&A, like whatever we tried with organic P&A, is to just get that first push, you know, and then hope that they tell their friends to watch it and they tell their friends to watch it. That's the only way to do it with indies like us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to cut a very long story very short. We've made a film and we've sent it to smaller festivals. Fortunately for us, we've won 3 Best Feature awards, but that's it. I don't know where to go. Can anybody advise me on sales agents and how to take this forward?
Well, actually, she's touching upon a very important point here that we haven't discussed, because sometimes films these days, especially because, and I guess Chris can confirm this, I mean, since the art house market globally is shrinking, or rather, it stayed the same size throughout the years, whereas the global mainstream market has expanded, sometimes films like Titi or Titli or even Court or Visaranai, in terms of their international circulation, might end up their lives in festivals. And the festival circuit can become like a different parallel circuit of distribution. You have to take the chance that it's offering you, because you can make a little bit of money out of festival circulation. I mean, festivals are available to pay screening fees. If you don't have a sales agent that is doing that for you, you should request them. I mean, you should request the festivals or the institutions that are screening your films, because then it's not just festivals, it could be film archives, film museums, schools, whatever. There is a little bit of money out there, because in most cases you wouldn't sell your film, but you can sell it bit by bit. And that's becoming the case more and more, even for the activity of sales agents. Then, of course, they are the ones who already have the connections, who already have the network, and can bring in those little ancillary sales that you, by yourself, may not be able to find out about, because, you know, maybe you sell your film to some in-flight entertainment retailers, you know, like those companies that then sell content to the various flying companies. I was surprised to see sometimes what kind of variety of films you get on certain companies. I mean, I found some obscure art house films that didn't get released anywhere in flight entertainment sometimes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How many festivals do you think there are in the world that could offer screening fees? That's a question I want to ask, actually, as a filmmaker still doing this.
It's an important question, I agree, because first of all, you have to know that festivals like Cannes, Venice, Berlin, Locarno, Toronto, they wouldn't pay screening fees. I mean, the festivals where you usually premiere your films are the ones where actually, you know, it's the reverse relationship. You want to get in. But then all the festivals that come along the way afterwards, you should do it. And then, you know, there's this interesting conflict for filmmakers, I guess, mostly, rather than for producers, that, okay, the festivals usually ask you, oh, what, do you want to come? Raam, come and introduce your film. We will pay you the flight, we will pay you the hotel, we will be glad to host you there and do the Q&As and everything. But then if you want to make a little bit of money, you should tell them, oh, I'm not coming. Can you pay me the screening fee? And most cases, they will. There are some festivals that out of their own internal policy have a standardized, you know, I mean, few. I mean, as much as possible, even the smaller festivals are trying, exactly because they are also running on a small budget. I mean, in this business of business, it's actually this word business sounds always so strange to me, because you know, I mean, everyone in this business is not making money. The filmmakers, the producers, the festivals themselves, we are all running on a shoestring budget. The festival is trying to make their best economies, so they're trying also not to pay for the films. But there are some that have standardized, you know, screening fees that they will pay to all the films. But usually it's important to ask. And, you know, the sales agents do it by standard. If you are handling your own film by yourself, start doing it. Start asking for the screening fees, even to the smaller festivals. Then if they don't accept, I mean, it's also a matter of negotiation. But then if they don't accept, just don't give the film.
Yeah, very good evening. Yeah, for me, for Raam, it's question. Today we are proud because of Titi and Rangitaranga, Kannada film industry has changed its and in international platform. For me, question is, earlier for Western and abroad, it is Indian films. But within India, there are multi-languages. And you, before I know what is the position of Kannada in terms of Tamil, Hindi, Bengali or Malayalam. So what is the groundwork you did to first overcome these all languages to get visibility within domestic?
You mean in the international, in the national release?
No. For me, for abroad, it's Indian film, only Indian film.
Yes.
But within India, there are multi-languages.
Yes.
Which got like Bengal, Malayalam, Tamil, Hindi, they are more dominant.
Yes.
And before Titi or Rangitaranga, Kannada was not that much.
Correct.
So how much homework you did to first overcome these all languages?
I guess I wasn't thinking like that. I was just trying to make the best film possible, you know, and I wasn't trying to position it as any kind of film. I just wanted to make it as good as I can. So really, I didn't think much about that. Just tried to do the best I could.
Okay,
But
one
was
last
it
question.
difficult to get press like during your release in Bombay because it is a Kannada film?
Yeah, so that's why I asked, is it nationally? I think good cinema in India is appreciated, full stop. And I personally have gone through the experience where the national industry in Bombay embraced Titi as a good Indian film. They didn't think of it as a Kannada film or anything. And I like that unity in India. I think it's there. So instead of splitting it, it's rather we just treat every single film as an Indian film and treat it based on content rather than its language or whatever.
This is one good development. You know, now in Bombay, we are getting language films subtitled. It wasn't so about 3, 4, 5 years ago. So getting good films subtitled in English means it appeals to anyone who's literate and can read.
I'm an owner of a film company, and what I did in the end is I put together my own database of 400 film festivals around the world, because it's very hard to really know where to start. The question for you is, there are very specific film festivals, for example, Children's Film Festival in Netherlands, but there are all the generic ones like Berlin, Venice, Telluride, Toronto, you name them. And the question is, do these A-list ones have certain kinds of personalities that you should, you know, follow? If you have a film that has a certain kind of personality, or do you think they're fundamentally all the same? The A-list, whatever you think that A-list is.
Paolo, that's for you.
It's a terrible question to ask because it touches upon some issues that are quite delicate. I could answer just by saying that it's also a matter of taste and timing, in the sense that, you know, these festivals are done by people. And sometimes, you know, there is a change of director in these festivals, and the taste of the festival changes radically sometimes. Sometimes the person in charge of a specific territory changes. And again, the choices he or she does in regard to that territory, in regard to that region, may be very different from the person who was there before. I don't want to get too much into detail about this, but it's something that you can detect within these big festivals. Of course, there are general trends. I would just say in general that, you know, festivals like Cannes, Berlin, and Venice are trying to present the best films that they can get. This would be the most diplomatic answer I can give you. Within this kind of search for the best that they can get, there are certain parameters of quality, basically, and also of prestige. It's obvious that the new films by important directors like Ken Loach or Lars von Trier would have, you know, sort of preferential lane to get into Cannes competition, as it happens with Venice, as it happens with Berlin. So it basically, I mean, it basically boils down to as I was saying, the timing, whether your film is coming at the right time and it's meeting with the right kind of people, the right kind of taste. Sometimes, I mean, it happened to me working through several years in Venice. The next year, the same film doesn't get in. The same film in terms of the same quality, the same kind of approach. And something that the year before would have not been ever taken in consideration gets to the main competition. It happens. So, good luck.
Okay. Well, with that, we end this discussion. Thank you so much for your participation. And thank you, Paolo, Chris, Raam, Uma, and Kanu. And we are here at the Film Bazaar, so you can always meet us for more questions if you like.